Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. And this is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. We're speaking to you a little bit earlier in the week this time. This is the afternoon of Tuesday, December 22nd. So we're going to take the long view on certain issues. But this is our Christmas Day program. It will first be broadcast on the afternoon of December 25th, 2015. So we want to reflect to some degree the holiday spirit. And the holiday spirit is there for everybody, be it New Year's, Christmas, Kwanzaa, or for you Donald Trump pagans out there. We've just had the winter solstice. So if you happen to be a pagan or a druid, why then that's for you. You can make merry with everybody else. That's for you Donald Trump supporters out there. But for the rest of us who do have some concept of charity, which Trump, of course, systematically rejects, and of course so does his shadow, right? His pilot fish Cruz, who in some ways may be an even bigger fascist. We want to think about this time of year, right? Of course, it's a time of darkness. It's a darkness in terms of the solstice, and the days are at their shortest, and at the same time also the darkness that this time we're having Christmas and New Year's under the shadow of fascism here at home. Horrendous, hideous fascism. You'd think that the failure of fascism in the 1930s and 40s especially would have been enough to terrify everybody, and you'd think that they'd still be operating on an ironclad resolution to have nothing to do with fascists or with fascism or Nazis and Nazism, or Nazi fascism and the Nazi fascists that bear it. But no, because fascism chooses to present itself each time in a newly refurbished and decked out garb, fascism, especially for the average person, is hard to tell. And we never really had adequate education on fascism because, of course, the people who ran, in particular, the U.S. Army during World War II, and I'm thinking of the pro-fascist Colonel Henry Stimson. We have some modern historians who have somehow gotten the facts on that guy quite garbled, leading to some rather lamentable episodes in a recent TV series. But Stimson, of course, ran the U.S. Army, and his two helpers were Robert Lovett and John J. McCloy, collectively the two of them called the Imps of Satan. Stimson, the one who decided to drop the atomic bomb on Japan, way above Truman's pay grade. McCloy, because of his experience with interning Germans during World War I, is the one responsible for the Japanese in the concentration camps. Lovett is responsible at one remove for the Vietnam War, in the sense that the absolute incompetence and lunatics that he recommended to Kennedy for the Kennedy cabinet, including McNamara and Rusk, turned out to be the warmongers that destroyed a generation. But let's put all that aside and go for the positive contact, if we can. So when we open up the classic secular text of this, it's A Christmas Carol in prose, being a ghost story of Christmas. And here in the first chapter, or stave 1, we have the encounter of Ebenezer Scrooge, who was a stock jobber. He's kind of a Donald Trump. He's a little bit older. Doesn't matter. Same idea. Represents finance capital. Operates on the London stock market, London Exchange. And he is confronted by his deceased partner, Jacob Marley, who comes back after 7 years from the grave, or indeed being buffeted as he flies around the world on the wind, we get the following. The question being Scrooge's question, why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me? And Marley replies, it is required of every man, it is required of every person, we should say, that the spirit within him or her should walk abroad among the fellow humans and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turn to happiness. In other words, if you had engaged in charity, as we're commanded to do, during your lifetime, then you not be in this terrible predicament. And of course, then there's this question of the weight of the fetters and the safes and the padlocks. And Marley comments, you need to know the weight and length of the chain, the strong coil you bear yourself. It was full as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago, and you have labored on it ever since. It is a ponderous chain. And what was the crime of Jacob Marley? Well, he was a good man of business, but as he now explains, the ghost, I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house, mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me. So you get the idea. It's a holiday season which needs to be based on charity. When we see racism, bigotry, xenophobia, violence, irrationalism, the rejection of law in favor of violence, because we're beginning to see that too, then we have big troubles. And quite frankly, when you get a fascist like Trump, I don't care who endorses him. I'm not interested in endorsements. They mean nothing. Hopefully, in the coming weeks and months especially, we will see that the Trump effort lacks a systematic mechanism for getting out the vote, the so-called ground game, right? That's the big problem with Trump, especially in a place like Iowa, right? We can see that, and we've been checking these things every day, that the overall Republican, fascisto-Republican Party view is that Trump is ahead. He's got 40 points or whatever it is. But at the same time, in Iowa, we see that Cruz is ahead. And we'll just take a look at that as we talk. The idea being, as we pointed out this past week, that Cruz has got a group of expert mind benders who are out there plying their trade. They're profiling people in Iowa, and they are getting ready to dupe them. And I want to warn everybody, I think this is a very important point. 8 years ago, I personally did not realize until the first week of December that the Obama campaign was in effect called revolution. Now on Trump, we got the good time well in advance of that. See you in a minute. World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. And in terms of Christmas in the shadow of fascism, very ugly shadow of fascism, bigotry, xenophobia, and warmongering, bombing the blankety blank out of somebody. And we'll get to some choice quotes from this two-paid demagogue. But right now, for the Republican presidential nomination 2016, Real Clear Politics is showing Trump at 15 up with a lead of 15.6% over Cruz. So they give Trump 33.6, they give Cruz 18%, and Rubio 12, Carson 10, Bush 4.5. Okay, so there seems to be at least some relative domination, but not absolute domination, because if you have 2/3 of the people against you, that's not absolute domination, is it? Not in anybody's book, not East, not West, or anywhere else. And then the psychological factor, of course, is a big deal. The Iowa Republican Presidential Caucus, here we find Cruz with a 4-point lead. The other fascist, right, the stealth fascist, the smiling, sallow, or sometimes smiling, sallow face of hypocrisy, right, always so concerned and so pained about the state of the country. So here we have Cruz at 30, Trump at 26.2. Cruz is up by 4%, and again, Rubio, Carson, Bush following. So that's the Iowa situation. Let's see what else we can find of great interest. I think we can find one or two. Let's see. How about this one? The general election, Trump versus Clinton. Real Clear Politics average as of right now. Clinton is up by 6.3%. So there's no domination there, not relative and any other kind. And what else? We have enough. Anyway, there are a number of these, so you can get the idea, right? There is no absolute domination, and you can see the difference if somebody like Trump is getting about 33, let's call it 34%, one third of one third at most is 1/9. Not so great, but in terms of the competition with somebody like Cruz, if Trump is coming in with 34% in the overall Republican Party contest, then what's the difference here? 30% for Cruz in Iowa, and I think that points exactly to what we've been telling you about, which is the activities of this very capable and formidable operation of mind benders, and that is people who can profile you and then shoot you a micro message to you that's going to absolutely play to your weaknesses, gullibilities, and quite possibly end up duping you. So look at all that. To me, that disparity between the national poll and the Iowa poll shows that indeed Trump's ground operation is lacking, because otherwise you'd see something more like the national poll in Iowa. And of course, watch out for Cruz, because in some ways more dangerous in the sense that he is a better dissembler, right? Trump is a one-trick pony. He plays himself. Right? He can't do roles, but Cruz has greater histrionic ability and therefore can do these things. So these are the Scrooges that infest the public life of the United States as we continue on here. So this is again Christmas in the shadows of fascism. Now let's just look at some of the problems that are with us now and will be. It's still war in the Middle East, and this really hurts, because if you look at Christianity, if you have any respect or any appreciation of the historical role of Christianity, you'd have to realize it starts in Syria. It starts with this guy Saulus, who gets knocked off his horse on the road to where? To Damascus, and you can still go and see where the tradition has it that this occurred. So this was the organizer of Christianity. When Saulus became Paulus, then that's when the faith, the church, the organization, because that's what it is, begins to flourish. And those letters, right, the letters that make up much of the New Testament are in effect internal documents of a political and religious organization, and you can read them. So the idea that the cradle of Christianity is still under this kind of attack is absolutely abhorrent and must end. But of course, the only way to do that is to work with the existing government. That is to say, the government of President Bashar al-Assad, who was universally recognized, at least de facto, by just about everybody in the world, and who has been reelected, and who is the only legal government of that country. The idea that we hear from, for example, Mrs. Clinton, in her raving performance in that debate, that you can do this without Assad is absolute insanity. Assad is the absolutely essential element of any strategy to crush the ISIL, Daesh terrorist congeries. And if you go and look at the Republican debate that we've just had about 10 days ago, you can remember that in this debate we had all sorts of Republicans, be it Christie, be it Kasich, be it Rubio and others. They want a no-fly zone over Syria. A no-fly zone means a tremendous bombing campaign over all of Syria. Don't let them kid you. Mrs. Clinton makes crude attempts to hide this fact. A no-fly zone must be preceded by the destruction of every airport, airbase, hangar, radar installation, airplane repair facility. Anything that has to do with flying has to be preemptively destroyed. Helicopters, helicopter bases, aircraft on the ground, runways have got to be cratered and put out of action. That's what a no-fly zone is. And of course, now you've got Russia on the scene, who will not respect your no-fly zone. So you're on the road to World War III. And I actually think Obama's critique of that was at least much more sensible than the fascist Republicans. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Merry Christmas to all, Happy New Year to all, and all other observances that are going on. We're in support of all of them, especially if they bring greater charity into the world, right? The so-called agape, which is it's the essence of any kind of Christianity. And let me also point out, if you consider yourself to be a Christian, you cannot support fascist, bigot, hate-monger Trump, nor his somewhat diluted and, did I say diluted? No, diluted follower there, his wingman, who's about to turn into his replacement, and that's Cruz. So, concerning this business with the no-fly zone and the safe haven, which is now boiled up again, these are the demands of Erdogan, right? Anybody who comes out for those things, I'd say, oh, are you on the Turkish payroll? Are you on Erdogan Davutoglu payroll? Or are you on the Saudi payroll? Or how about the Qatar payroll? You notice Bernie Sanders at this debate, he loves King Abdullah of Jordan. Man, take a look at that guy's human rights record. He's an absolute monarch. Forget it. He loves Qatar. Bernie loves Qatar. Bernie loves Saudi. The guy's a monarchist. What can I tell you? The only countries he likes in the Middle East are absolute monarchies. They're not even feudal monarchy. Feudal monarchy much better than this absolutist Dark Ages monarchy that we have in the form of these groups. I guess he's gonna tell us about Morocco soon, and he's gonna tell us about a couple of other places, right? They probably go through the list of the Gulf Cooperation Council. But still, the question was the no-fly zone. And concerning the no-fly zone, it means bombing the entire country to kingdom come. And then, in the process of this, Russia will not allow it, and you're headed for World War III. So indeed, if you want World War III, then you guys up there in New Hampshire, right? You early voters, if you vote for Christie, don't complain when the rockets come down, because you've been asking for it, right? Everything that happens in international affairs is a two-way street. Reciprocity. Sauce for the goose. Sauce for the gander. Turnabout is fair play. All of this is the essence of international affairs. So if you don't want it done to you, don't do it to anybody else. In a certain way, it's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So there we are back with some element of charity. But now, when Mrs. Clinton says, my no-fly zone, she says, Mrs. Clinton's no-fly zone is not the same as, for example, the Christie mean, aggressive, unforgiving, shoot-on-sight, hip-shot, cowboy sort of no-fly zone. Why then, she's lying, but she says, with her no-fly zone, the first option would not be to start shooting. You'd try to prevent people from coming in there. But what if they refuse? What if the Russian position is, which is true, that they've been invited by the legitimate government? You have not. And who the hell are you anyway? And get out of the way. And who are you giving orders to, right? You have no mandate in the Security Council or anything like that. Now, last week, we did have this interesting and perhaps promising development that there's going to be, and it has been enacted now, a 1.5-year timetable to try to bring about this political solution. But there are too many careers of neocon fascist madmen in the State Department and mad women, and also among the humanitarian bombers. They're going to have a very hard time getting away from this Assad derangement syndrome that we are seeing. But the main point is that Hillary Clinton's no-fly zone is just as much after World War III as Christie's. The only differences are rhetorical. Christie might get you into a shooting war 10 or 15 minutes earlier than Mrs. Clinton, but this is the same. So now we look out on this incredibly bleak and desolate political landscape and hope for some unforeseen change, and try to do the best we can. In other words, most revolutionary thing you can do is tell the truth loudly, clearly, and systematically. Say what is going on. State bluntly and hopefully effectively what is actually happening. Sometimes that's the most you can do. Now, Christmas in the shadow of fascism. We have a couple of pieces of rays of light, beams of light at the end of the tunnel. Ramadi, the second largest city in the Anbar province of Iraq. The Iraqi army, much maligned, has now redeemed itself to a significant extent by getting into the center of Ramadi. They're now in the center. And the Iraqi military estimates that after about 72 hours, they will have essentially taken the city, liberated the city, kicked out the ISIS lunatic, fanatic butchers, genocide cult. Right now, the ISIS people are down to about 300 fanatics in sniper positions inside the rubble of this unfortunately destroyed city. But now, we just had Sinjar in the 11th of November, a little bit more than a month ago. Sinjar fell within 2 days, and now in this case, Ramadi seems to be going rather faster than was widely thought. You got to remember, the Iraqi army is so hard on these guys, right? Remember, Jerry Bremer destroyed that army in an act of complete lunacy, which was countenanced by Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and the rest of them, Kandi. He destroyed the Iraqi army. And remember, the other thing is the tradition in the Iraqi army is that you get bribed. The United States had started to bribe the Iraqi army back in 19 1991. Desert Shield and Desert Storm included large components of bribery. Later on, 2003, another round of bribery by the U.S. and others. And now you can see what's going on is Saudi bribery, Qatar bribery, Emirati bribery from the United Arab Emirates and all the rest of this stuff. So that's what's going on. But it means that it shows again that ISIS, ISIL, Daesh can be defeated. Now, the issue that remains on the table, and this is in some ways the shame of the civilized world, and I don't care, Russia, United States, Europe, Germany, France, everybody, the shame of the civilized world is that the Jarablus corridor is still functioning. In other words, that traffic of the oil coming out and going into the Turkish and international markets, and the fanatical recruits, the ammunition, the food, the spare parts, the sinews of war going in. That Jarablus corridor has to be closed. This is a crime against civilization. There is no mystery about this. ISIS is not some kind of mysterious force. It's not a spirit that comes in the window. It's a very stinking, malodorous pile of creeps who come in, and they need to be supplied. They need food, they need ammunition, they need gasoline, they need spare parts, they need all this stuff. You close the Jarablus corridor, and that is the end of them. And again, you would have the opportunity to pocket, to bag, to encircle large for today's world. So, forces of the civilized world close the Jarablus corridor. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So, the Jarablus corridor must be closed. This is a stain on the civilized world. If you believe in civilization, as we've known it, or in any other form, you've got to get busy pressuring your government, your congressman, your senator, your member of parliament, whoever it is, to get the Jarablus corridor closed. Because when you do that, that is the way to wipe out ISIS. And I'm afraid if nobody's willing to do this, it means that everybody, all the powers, right, all of them are somehow complicit. They're conniving together to keep this ISIS alive because probably everybody finds something about this horrendous thing that they like in the short run, right? So degraded is the political life of this planet. So concerning the United States government, I just have to remind you what Obama said in this NPR interview was if you have a no-fly zone, well, ISIS, Daesh they have no air force, but who does have an air force is the Syrian Arab army. They have a capable air force. And then, of course, the Russian planes are there, too. So what you're doing is protecting ISIS from being bombed by Syria, and at the same time you're trying to ground the Syrian Air Force, and you're going to get embroiled with Russia. For the sake of what? For the sake of the phantomatic Free Syrian Army, right? The friends of McCain, right? McCain, who loves kidnappers, caliphs, and cannibals, and cavorts with them. What a monstrosity. And the other, we have to lament Syria, of course, because this in many ways is the most tolerant, the most socially advanced of these countries. Iraq had much to recommend it, but it's been flattened over the past 25 years, several times over. But when we look at Syria, we see the destruction of something truly valuable, which has to be stopped and it has to be turned around. But then there's Libya. Today, we're seeing a news film of the Islamic police force, right? Of course, not Islamic at all, but ISIS, Daesh police force, parading through the streets of Sirte. Notice this, the irony, right? Gaddafi's hometown. Well, Mrs. Clinton went in there cackling. We came, we saw, he died. That's what he says that's what she says about Gaddafi. Now, what do you have instead of Gaddafi? You have ISIS. You have Daesh. And Gaddafi, as he got older and became more mature, cared less and less about international terrorism. He had other things. He had the Great Man-Made River. He had some real positive achievements. This current parade of cretins you do not have. Right now there's fighting in places that we learned about in 2011, right? Ajdabia, the oil exporting point, right? If ISIS gets that, then they can essentially mobilize 500,000, 1 million barrels of oil per day. And that will be very bad. So the wonderful CIA has got their man Haftar, Khalifa Haftar, in Tobruk, in the Tobruk and Derna terrorist axis, Benghazi, and so forth. Those guys are essentially completely useless. And then there's a Khanjari is ruling in Tripoli. So in these two important countries, Syria and Libya, it's chaos. And this is the direct fruit of the regime change, color revolution, Arab Spring, demagogic monstrosity promoted by Mrs. Clinton. So this is awful. And we have to remember what is it that Mrs. Clinton is attacking? Right? She's not really attacking, or she's attacking far more than Gaddafi or Bashar. She's attacking civilization itself. In other words, this is the most cynical imperialist mindset, which is to say, it's better to have the world lapse into chaos, barbarism, and mayhem. Better that than to have some independent or hostile force, but even an independent force is unacceptable to them ruling a place like Libya or Syria. And by the way, I'm getting the idea that Britain and France, especially Britain out in front now, they seem to be in the process of implementing that Anglo-French treaty of the fall of 2010, I think November, which called for Operation Harmattan, one of these Mediterranean winds, that would be the British-French recolonization of Libya. And that could happen at any time. And if you want to demonstrate about something over there in Britain, why don't you demonstrate against that? Right? I guess at this point, the best you could hope for would be a UN peacekeeping force, but that would then have to be balanced. Right, you'd have to have some Russians. You might want to have some Chinese or something like this, right? So that wouldn't be just the British and the French. Now, 705 years ago, Dante Alighieri, the great poet, came to Milan and met with the Emperor Henry of Luxembourg, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, the Emperor of Germany. And between Dante and Henry of Luxembourg, they installed the Visconti dynasty in Milan, Italy, which before the end of the 1300s, right, just a few decades after this event in 1310, 705 years ago, this month of December, this is the birth of the modern state, or better yet, the birth of a prototype that leads rather quickly to a modern state, right, in the work of, let's say, Francesco Sforza, and then that's copied over or taken over and improved by Louis XI of France, by Henry VII of England. That's the modern state. Now, the main thing you have to understand about this is that the development of the modern state, which still represents by far the most effective form of human organization, especially in the Franklin D. Roosevelt New Deal form. The problem is that the modern state depends on having a middle class. You cannot have a situation where you have a few rich and then a tiny middle class and a mass of peasants and beggars. This won't work because the people can't be educated to the point where they can be economically productive. Their labor is worth nothing, and the society therefore is impoverished and cannot grow, cannot advance. The middle class is essentially due to the fact that with the revival of international trade, commerce, science, navigation, and so forth in the 1300s, 1400s, you get to the point where you can have a sufficient social surplus. So John Galeazzo Visconti offered debt relief to farmers. Louis XI based himself on the bourgeoisie of the French towns. Henry VII said he was going to be the policeman who would prevent the feudal nobility and their private warfare from destroying trade and bankrupting the state. So the middle class and the modern state go together. Now, the news of recent days, and of course it's been this has really been a process of many years, is that the Pew Research activity has come up with an analysis which now shows the American middle class as a minority compared to the upper class and the impoverished and immiserated lower classes. So the middle is being squeezed. Now, people know this. People are generally aware of it. It's at the heart of all the political developments of our time. So what we have is the middle class being squeezed, crushed by finance capital, and precipitating into the lower, immiserated, and super exploited category. Middle class is shrinking, modern state getting weaker, and fascism growing in the form of Trump, Cruz, and others. Back in a minute. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. This is our Christmas program. Our Christmas program coming to you from Washington, D.C. But now we're going to go to Madrid, Spain, where we're very happy to be joined by a special guest, known to our listeners and much appreciated by them. And that is Pilar Baselga. Pilar is obviously a writer on a number of themes. She can tell us her website in just a second, but her most famous book is one that we should all read, No Morir Idiota. Don't die as an idiot. Right? Try to educate yourself so that you don't die as an idiot. And other than that, she is a leading art historian, right? She's associated with the critique of the Indignados encampment at the Puerta del Sol in Madrid, and she has pointed out the numerous contradictions and unsavory angles of that. So, Pilar Baselga, welcome. We're so happy to have you.
So am I, because you were calling me for other programs and it was impossible to do it. So I'm very happy to be with you today.
You're very much in demand, we know. So therefore, we're very lucky. Now, we just had a Spanish election, right? That has now happened last Sunday. So please give us an overview of how you would read the outcome of that Spanish election.
Well, when, I run for the elections, I didn't tell you, for the European elections, right? In a party that was created by a judge who was suing the banksters, right? And he put in jail 2 times one of the biggest thieves of the Spanish Bankia, the Caja Madrid Bankia. Well, okay. So it was
Tell us the name of the party, and I guess this was the European Parliament?
Yes, I tell you this because to explain what I'm going to say you afterwards. So my experience for running in a very small party, and in this moment, Podemos was beginning, right? Was beginning like our party. Both we had more or less the same birth, like at the beginning of the 2014. And suddenly we tried to go to the TVs and to radios, and it was impossible. But this guy, Pablo Iglesias, he was everywhere. You cannot imagine. And somebody calculated how much they had spent in publicity on this party. And it was about 7 million euros that he had for free. Because he was all the time on the main channels, on the main mainstream medias, the official medias, we just couldn't believe it. We say, what is happening with this guy? Who is behind him? You know? So, since it started, Podemos is something absolutely manipulated, controlled by those who are pulling the strings. And what was the purpose? The purpose is, because the two main parties, who are the PP, which is the conservative, and the PSOE, which is the socialist, were just in bankrupt. I mean, they are falling because they are so corrupt, and nobody believes them anymore. You have lots of other little parties beginning, like our party, okay, and many others, Recortesero, Vox, many other little parties. And we are starting, let's say, to say, well, we don't like these two parties, we're going to do something else. Okay? So we have seen this very clearly from those who are in the activism, that Podemos has been just supported, financed somewhere, or we don't know who was behind, because it was everywhere. And so this guy who in January 2014 was absolutely, nobody knew him at all except his mommy and daddy and friends. Suddenly in May, he was in everywhere. I mean, especially in the programs that you sit, you know, in the main prime time, you know, like 8, 9 o'clock in the evening when you're at home and with your family, and in programs. And he was there all the time. Okay?
Now, again, for our listeners, this is Pablo Iglesias. If you've seen him on television, he's the one with the ponytail. He's got this
That's right.
ponytail of hair, so you can tell him. That's him.
He presents himself. I mean, if you follow what he has done with the party, is he's not at all a Democrat person. I mean, he's just getting rid of people when he doesn't like them, and behaving in a very, very disgusting way. But anyway, as there is such a desire and a necessity of really changing this political life in Spain, you have so many people who are in the different parts of Spain, in the different cities, in the different town halls. You have parties everywhere. Okay, so things are not that clear, that easy. It's not black and white. You know, Pablo Iglesias has been raised and supported by the big power in the shade, and at the same time in the party you have a lot of nice people who really want to change things. So I cannot tell you what's going to happen. So what is the result of the elections? People have to know that we voted for the parliament. But something that nobody knows outside, and even in Spain they don't realize, is that here in Spain we don't vote for a president, right? You vote for the Congress and for the president. Is that right?
Yes, correct. We have presidential system. Yours is a parliamentary system, right?
Yes, but what is awful in Spain is that you vote to a list, okay? You vote a list of people, the party, and you vote a list, okay? And these people on this list of congressmen have been placed there in the list by the leader of the party with his finger. You, and you, you, and you, and you. Okay, you understand? So these people who are on the list, who finally become congressmen, they are in debt with their boss, who is the leader of the party. They are not in debt with the voters, with the electors, with the people. You understand what I mean? So
Certainly.
These people who are put in the list, who finally come to the parliament, and the majority of the parliament, they elect a government, what is the contrary of democracy, because, you know, to have a democracy, you have to have the powers divided. The executive and the legislative must be separated, okay? And not in Spain.
What you're talking about is the British parliamentary system, which is exactly what you've just described, in which the executive comes out of the parliament. So there is no check and balance in that sense. But let me ask you, in some countries that have this system, they have so-called preferences. In other words, if you're a voter, you can say, yeah, I see your list and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm going to go down and give my vote to number 22 because that's who I want. Can you do that at all in Spain?
No, at all. But the difference is that in England, as you say, but these people who are in the parliament, they have not been chosen by somebody on top of their party. These are people who run for the elections in their own town, okay? And they get the vote of the people of their town. So they really represent the people. You understand what I mean? They run for their own town, their own region, their own people. And so you vote this guy, and this guy is representing you. This guy goes to the parliament, and then, okay. You understand what I mean? Now, what happens in France? Okay, in France you have another story. In France you vote to the president, and then you vote to the parliament. Okay? In the parliament you vote more or less like in England. Okay? You vote somebody who is running for the elections in your circumscription, in your town, and this person is going to represent you in the parliament. And they are the legislative power. And then you vote to the president, directly to the president. And the president creates the government. So you have a balance. They are not related. I mean, these are two different powers, but not in Spain. In Spain, first, the parties are not representing the people, and you cannot choose the person. Sorry?
Hang on 1 second. We got to get on. Yes. We're going to move on in the second, our second segment with Pilar to what actually happened in this most recent election. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Merry Christmas to all, our Christmas program, and we're so happy to be joined by Pilar Baselga from Madrid, Spain, and she's been telling us about the inherent flaws of the, I guess, post-Franco constitution. But now we just had this election, so Pilar, everybody is curious, who won, what does it mean?
Okay, I make it short, very easy. We have 350 congressmen, okay? 123 is the most voted party, is the PP, the Conservative Party, the party of Rajoy, who is now in power. Second most voted is 96, I think, deputies, congressmen. This is Pedro Sanchez, who went to Bilderberg. It's important to tell this to people. He went to Bilderberg, okay?
Okay, then and this is the PSOE?
Socialist.
The Socialist Party. In other words, the Felipe Gonzalez Party, for people who know that.
That's right. That's right. And then you have 60-something, and 60-something of Podemos. Okay?
Yes, we can.
And then you have that's right. And then you have 40-something, I don't remember exactly the numbers, sorry, of the new right-wing young guy who's called Alberto Rivera, okay? Who is very, he's rightist, completely conservative, and he is against the Catalonian separation, right? And then you have a few groups like 9 and 2 and Thing and 5 of little parties who are from the Basque region and the Catalonian region, you know, and the Communist Party is only 2 congressmen, I mean. So what is the point? Now we have the problem. To make the government, they have to be the majority, what we call absolute majority, which is half of it plus 1, which is 176, okay? So, if you count the right-wing PP with the young guy, Alberto Rivera, who is also rightist, they don't get to this majority. So they cannot go together. They cannot make government. If the socialists goes together with Podemos, they do have the majority. Then they can pack a government, right? But I read today that Pedro Sánchez said in the last speech that he was thinking of making a union with the right, with the PP, with Rajoy, which is something absolutely unbelievable. And it's also the Church of Spain, the head of the Spanish Church, Roman Catholic Church, said that PP, so the party, the Conservative Party and the Socialists should go together to keep Spain united. So nobody knows what is going to happen yet, because it's very, very strange what is happening now. We don't know what is going to happen. Okay?
So we have a number of possible majorities. The socialists and Podemos would be a majority, enough to make a government. And the PPE, the Popular Party of Rajoy, the austerity prime minister, they could have a grand coalition with Sanchez, but that would be a complete sellout, right?
It is, yes, but this can happen if you know that in Spain, at least, I don't know how it is in the States, but in Spain, the PP and the socialists, it is exactly the same. In Spain we say it's different, same dogs with different colors. They have exactly the same. They are always Bilderberg. They do what Bilderberg says. Anything, they are doing things for the bankers, and they govern against the people, you know? So, everything is, I am afraid that this horrible thing, strange thing, especially together with the PP, the conservatives, this can be possible, even if it is so strange, but it can be possible because Bilderberg
This is, of course, the German model is the socialists together with the Christian Democrats, and that's sort of what you have here, right?
Exactly. It's what we call the social democracy,
right?
Which means everything is possible. I have no values, and the values are the values of the power. That's it.
Power. There we go. Pilar, let me ask you right now, please come back next time. It'll be a week from Friday, right, in January, and please give us another report. But now in the couple of minutes we have left, can you just give us some idea of research that you were calling out to my attention about the role of the Indignados of Spain, once again, in Occupy, and the preponderance of foreign operatives in Occupy? Just a few words, if you could.
Yes. It's not me. It's a friend of mine, who made an incredible research about who is behind the Occupy Wall Street movement, the 15M, so the Occupy in Spain, the color revolutions in the former Soviet republics, and behind the Euromaidan in Ukraine, and what is behind the Arab revolutions and Arab Springs and all this. And it's always the same people. These are different groups that are financed by Soros. So this is what we call the controlled dissent, or disidencia controlada.
The controlled opposition. Controlled opposition.
Yes, they organize this, and I remember I read in your blog that some of the people who were in Occupy Wall Street look really like soldiers. Isn't that you said that?
Yes.
Well, in Madrid it was
they had the military short haircut.
That's right. Well, in Madrid it was like students of economic Yale University. You understand what I mean? What sort of look they had? So you had these kind of hippies on the floor and smoking marijuana and all that. But those who were running the camp in Madrid, they were very well dressed, and they were really smart, and you could see that they were students of or already graduated people from a business school, you know. This is, and also there is a Jewish guy everywhere. I don't remember his name, who married a Jewish Spanish girl, and he's there in all these camping camps and Indignados groups. He's always there. So please post on your radio the link to this article, because they have there all the information. I think he made a great job, because you have he printed the screen, and you can see in English lots of information for those who don't speak Spanish.
All right. So, Pilar, we want to thank you. And again, please make time on your calendar around, 10 o'clock night or so, a week from Friday. Not this Friday, but the following week. And we'll get you back on for more about the government in Spain.
Send me a mail to refresh me, because now I am... Okay?
You're very busy. We know. We got to compete, but we'll try. Okay? Thank you so much. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Merry Christmas to all. our Christmas Day program. A very interesting line from Pilar Baselga in Madrid, and we will have her back in the near future. Now, Christmas in the shadow of fascism. Trump, Cruz. We just had, a couple of recent gems. The barbarism, the insolence, the impudence, the filthy potty mouth of the fascist Trump. There's a right-winger, crude, arrogant, boastful. Trump says Hillary got schlonged in the primaries of 2008. That's just wonderful from Trump, right? The barbarism of the entire public discourse goes downhill. Trump says he hates reporters, but he won't kill them. Now that's if that's not fascism, I don't know what is. You're essentially threatening the press with homicide, and but you're going to magnanimously let them live. So Trump is making faces like Mussolini used to. Take a look at some Mussolini films: posturing, strutting, mugging, grimaces, all this stuff. That's the Duce, and obviously the Donald has been studying the Duce in many ways. Now, the other one we heard from Trump a day or two ago, he talks about Untermenschen. Untermenschen is one of the most horrendous elements of the Nazi vocabulary. It means you're subhuman. So Trump comes out and saying this or that of his adversaries. I think he's talking about ISIS, but it doesn't really matter. That they're subhuman. They're Untermenschen. Well, you don't want to do that, right? Even Mad Dog Bush the Younger had the sense that you don't want to get into that kind of thing. And in the same breath, interestingly enough, Trump attacked Abraham Lincoln for jailing secessionist newspaper reporters and editors, or shutting down those newspapers. Now, notice also, fascism is directed against what they call bourgeois politicians. In other words, congressmen, senators, members of parliament, right? Practitioners of parliamentary cretinism, if you want. But notice the exclusive focus on the politician means that the bankers get off scot-free. They're never hit. They're never exposed. They're never in the middle of all this stuff. So let's look a little bit more in depth now. I'm trying to find some books that exist in English that are useful for understanding fascism, and I'll report on that in the coming week or two. But here I have a book by a French writer, active, I guess, in the 50s, 60s, into the 70s. It's Daniel Guérin, G-U-E, accent aigu, R-I-N, and this is a series that he published in the old leftist publishing house, Maspero, right, M-A-S-P-E-R-O. So this is called Fascisme et Grand Capital, fascism and big capital, finance capital, in effect. And he's got a number of interesting chapters. He goes into who finances fascist movements. I would add that foreigners are important in financing both Mussolini and Hitler. The troops, right? In other words, the disgruntled war veterans, the desperate unemployed. And then he starts off with mysticism. It's very interesting. The third chapter of a book about fascism was completed in essentially the main text in 1945. But mysticism comes first, and then fascist demagogy. And we'll get to the rest of these fascist tactics, grandeur and decadence of the plebeians. In other words, the role of gutter snipes in all this, the SA, sort of the brown shirts, the real fascist doctrine, fascism against the working class, the political economy of fascism, and the farm ag sector policies of fascism. But let's start with the mysticism. The main idea here is that in order to have fascism, you have to have a climate of widespread irrationalism, contempt for reason, the active, hostile rejection of human reason in favor of instincts, myths, superstitions, animism, totemism, paganism, superstition, right? Aberglaube, superstition. That's what they deal in. This is obviously very bad radical subjectivism, and it's pragmatism. Remember, Mussolini is the guy who says that he, as a fascist, learned fundamental things from William James, the pragmatist. And the main idea here is you can tell anybody any story you want, and if they believe it and act on it, then it becomes true, at least for them. It doesn't. That's extremely important. Don't get yourself on that treadmill. Now, let's just take a quick look. Guérin, right, the French writer in the 40s and into the 50s. He says, look, fascism needs mysticism because, remember, fascism is a market of dupes. It takes, let's take the multi-billionaire Trump, and let's have him together with a small shopkeeper or some unemployed guy or somebody who's just waking up from several years in the Rand Paul school of menticide. The recruits from fascism come from all different classes. And they're oriented, they're brought together not on the basis of interests, but on the basis of hysteria, right? Fear, hatred. So anti-capitalist demagogy of all kinds is good, but it's got to be supplemented by mysticism. Now, the other thing about this is fascism cannot appeal to interests because imagine you're a party supported by finance capital. The secret purpose of your activity is to protect the privileges of the super rich. You can't, in that case, appeal to the intelligence of your recruits. You've got to appeal to the lower part of the body or to their hysteria, right? And remember, fascism is a movement of broken souls. These are unhappy, disgruntled people. So that kind of suffering predisposes them to mysticism. In its heart of heart, of course, in terms of Trump. Imagine how Trump discusses his dupes and his followers and his useful idiots in private. Right? It's a kind of contempt for the masses. Mussolini talked openly about this, and he said, look, he had read the work of the French writer Gustave Le Bon, Lebon, and the work is called Psychology of Crowds, the psychology of the mob, we might say. So Mussolini says, it's been very important for me to understand mass psychology, or better yet, mob psychology, and to have this tactile and visual experience of what the mob wants and what the mob can do. And his conclusion is that the mob is a woman, feminine, and more contempt for humanity, his friend. A good half of it and more. So we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Merry Christmas to all. Remember, if God is willing to come into the world is not that bad. The world is not radically evil. It can be reformed. It can be developed. It's susceptible to improvement. So that's the lesson of Christmas. And don't go with the people from the Rockefeller Foundation who want to tell you that Judas was a good guy who was trying to ultimately free Christ from this terrible mistake of having come into the world. No, God has got to be able to come into the world, because otherwise the world may be radically evil. So it's essentially the good housekeeping seal of approval for this world, this material universe, is the fact that God can come into it and still remain God. A very important point. Now, Mussolini, based on the mob psychology of Le Bon, says crowds, masses, are feminine. They are incapable of having their own opinions except for the ones that are imposed on them. You don't try to reason with them. You're trying to impress them and seduce them. They only know simple and extreme feelings. They only respond to images. Now, this, of course, points to this terrible misogyny in fascism, right? The hatred of women. We would have to do a sociological survey. If you listened to 5 years of Opie and Anthony and their unbearable misogyny, then does predispose you to vote for Trump. I imagine there's a big overlap. Some sociologists over there better get busy. Stop doing the nonsense you usually do and do this. Hitler says, in the great majority, the people is in their disposition and their state of mind is completely feminine, and it only their acts are determined by sense impressions and not by reflection. Right? Reflection? No, we don't want that. Says Hitler. The masses do not respond to abstract ideas, but you can get them easily into motion on the basis of their feelings. Now, Guérin, supplementing this, says, fascism presents itself as a religion, and it's a religion of fear and hatred. Mussolini says fascism is a religious concept. And then also, we also have to remember that Mussolini actually created a school, a department, a university department of fascist mysticism in Milan, and the several times Italian prime minister, sort of a perennial prime minister, Amintore Fanfani. Fanfani was a professor of fascist mysticism in this school. So the idea is it's a religious commitment that they're looking for, and in doing this, they study the techniques of the Catholic Church, of the Jesuit order, and other orders, and try to use these appeals to get the kind of obedience and mobilization that they want. Now, there are cultist elements in fascism. We go like this. The first is the man on horseback, the man of providence, right? The savior of the nation, right? So the man on horseback, it's a kind of idolatry. It's a kind of myth of national salvation. And at the same time, they're talking about a savior. Here we have Fritz Thyssen, right? The guy who worked together with Prescott Bush. He says, we are hoping for a savior who will get us out of our misery. But nobody knows when he'll come. Thyssen, 1922. Miller van den Broek, a writer. This guy is involved in all sorts of things. He writes, we need a Führer, a leader. And Hitler says the people have to give the dictator what he wants. So then there's the cult of infallibility. So Mussolini is always right, is in the commandments of the fascist militia. So the Italian fascist youth organization, the Balilla, one of the things he had to swear was, I believe in the genius of Mussolini. This is exactly Trump, right? I don't know how he'll do it, but Trump will find a way, right? Through the triumph of the will, he'll succeed where the other politicians fail. How? By personal magnetism, by the force of his will, and all this stuff. Goering tells a British reporter, Hitler is infallible, precisely in the same way that the Catholics believe that about the Pope. So this goes on and on. Now, it's a religion of chauvinism. When Trump talks about the homeland, this is very similar. This is sort of a fetishized, sacral, mythological notion of the United States as a country. This homeland sounds very Germanic, sounds a little bit authoritarian. The the fetish of the honored dead. The tradition of Italian fascism starts off with all of the people who got killed in street fighting with socialists and trade unionists, the people who got killed in Fiume with D'Annunzio, and above all, the dead of the First World War. That's a fetish of the dead. And of course, the Nazi song, the Horst Wessel song, is that the Nazis who got killed, the SA stormtroopers who got killed, are victims of the Red Front and of the reactionaries, but they're still marching with us. And they have all of this lugubrious, mawkish sentimentality in various monuments in cities. Youth, that's another big one, right? That Italy says that youth is absolutely important. This is obviously Oedipal, right? It's the desire to overthrow authority figures, and of course that means the father is going to take it on the chin. So that is going on. And of course in Nazism we have no less a figure than the philosopher Martin Heidegger, who says in his the inaugural speech as the rector of the University of Freiburg, he wants to tell you that the choice for Nazism has already been made by the youngest part of the German nation. There's also the mysticism of the veteran. We have a lot of that. Trump, right? Oh, I love veterans, right? He won't do anything for them, but he loves them. The mysticism of the veteran. And the idea with that is only those who have been in the trenches, only those who have been in the storm of steel, or in this case, Ramadi or Fallujah or Helmand province or whatever it is, only those veterans can really understand what it's all about, right? Rudolf Hess says the Third Reich found its foundation in an idea that came out of the trenches. Mussolini's group, 1915, the Fasci di Combattimento, the fighting groups, the spirit of the trenches. One writer who represents this is Ernst Jünger, and he's the author of a novel called The Storm of Steel. And that means it's the Fronterlebnis, right? It's the experience of having been at the front. So veterans get to be fetishized. Then we have the use of the most modern technological means. You have to imagine the socialists were on the whole a stodgy bureaucratic group. They claimed to be revolutionary, but they, of course, were not. Think of Bernie Sanders, because he's a socialist. So the crews have that. Repetition, contempt for reason, magic, and the socialists are simply incapable of fighting back, because at that time they're all Marxist determined. They see subjective facts. So that's at least the summary of this Guérin's chapter on fascist mysticism. So be forearmed against that. Merry Christmas to all, happy holidays, happy New Year, and we'll see you next week at the usual time.